Welcome back everybody to the Wandering Samurai Study, in which we review and analyze every single act told in Rurouni Kenshin, and today's act is Act 78, Cho of the 10 Swords. We get some confirmation here that Cho definitely intended to kill Iori, and there's just something very, very tragic and horrible about that idea. Murder itself of a young child is terrible, don't get me wrong, but if you kind of think about it, like, there's just an extra layer of tragedy in that this is the grandson of the guy who created the sword that Cho is after. So with the final sword, Shakku's final masterpiece, which is also intended to be a god sword, never to be stained by the blood of man, is going to be used on his grandson. And that's just too much to bear. But we got that confirmation here, it seems. Anyways, let's get into the chapter summary review, and we'll get into the rest of the chapter. Cho assumes Kenshin arrived looking for Shakku's final sword. However, the Wanderer says that he only wants Iori and that he can have the blade. Cho thinks that it'd be more interesting to have Kenshin fight him for Iori, and so their fight begins. Despite Kenshin's handicap, he is able to handle his own against Cho's advances. Feeling frustrated by Kenshin's lack of attention in the duel, Cho threatens to kill Iori, and Kenshin's battle face reveals itself, prompting Cho to claim that it's time to get serious by revealing some steel belts under his clothing. The rest of the group shows up, and Seiku notices the steel belts to actually be another sword. Cho tells Kenshin that he's known as Sword Hunter Cho, and that it's time to see his true skill. I've actually been very excited to cover this part of the manga for quite some time, because one of the biggest videos on my channel is why the New Kyoto arc fails. It's been a long time since I've seen the New Kyoto arc, and I only made it up to this part of that retelling to know that, like, I've seen enough and I can make a video about it. But to this day, I continuously get comments on that video, and people telling me like it's so much more worse. But I stopped here, and I hear that like there's some stuff with Shishio. I don't know, maybe someday I'll watch it. But there are elements in this chapter and the next chapter afterwards where it's revealed that this is a very interesting fight, despite Kenshin being clearly the stronger person against Cho. As far as I remember New Kyoto arc goes, it blunders on that because it doesn't take any of these elements into account. And anyways, just kind of rereading this chapter and the next chapter, as that outline's already done at the time of this video, it just really goes to show that, like, this is a really interesting part of the manga, and it otherwise wouldn't be had Kenshin had a Sakabato. Let's get into Kenshin versus Cho then. As I've kind of already touched on, one of the reasons that this fight is so interesting is because Kenshin is at a clear disadvantage and has a handicap. However, Kenshin is still able to control the situation. So much so that it bothers Cho, but we'll get into that in just a moment. What I mean by this though is that the lack of Kenshin's sword is why we're here and why this moment is so tense. We don't know what Kenshin's gonna do. He went into that fight completely unarmed, maybe? Like, he has his sheath, but his sheath can only do so much. His sword is actually broken. Where Kenshin, like, is able to dodge all of Cho's advances and still be able to take his attention to Iori and try to keep the child calm in the situation is why, like, if there was a Sakabato, this would be like non-issue. And that's just one of the things that I really liked about the Cho versus Kenshin fight. is just seeing Kenshin completely in control despite being at a disadvantage. So let's get into Cho and his personality. Cho calls this a fair fight. This is not a fair fight. I mean, Kenshin points it out in the chapter that like his idea of a fair fight is pretty twisted. But as we already saw in the last chapter, Cho is pretty much a bully. You know, he's so used to using his ability to murder and be adept at handling a sword to oppress people that he deems unworthy, or somebody who isn't willing to or doesn't have the chops to stand up to him. That's what we saw in the last chapter with Seiku and his wife, that, you know, they're not swordsmen, they don't have warrior prowesses, and so therefore their son was just taken from them. And Cho, he looks at Kenshin as this very frail person, very scrawny, you know, and just assumes that he would have the upper hand. And so when Kenshin is able to just not give him what he wants in this fair fight, it frustrates him so much, because Kenshin doesn't really care about Cho. He's not there for Cho, he's there for Iori. And he's much better at his craft or at his skill than Cho is. Cho tries to use a thrust attack on Kenshin, and Kenshin tells him, was like, dude, you need something better than Saito's Gatotsu if you think that this is gonna work. And that was like, that's like super cool of Kenshin, you know, not having a sword but being able to, you know, counter him and fend them off. Here's my question that I don't really think has an answer, but it's still pretty kind of interesting to me, in that Cho says that had Kenshin revealed his fighting prowess, you know, his battle phase right from the get-go, he would have taken him seriously, which I don't really think is true. I don't think that he ever really intended to take Kenshin serious. You know, he just wanted a good time, and he assumed that Kenshin was weak because he was smaller than him. And Cho's pretty used to getting his way, it seems. And now let's finish off the video by talking about Gramps and Misao arriving. It serves for two purposes. The first purpose is for them to essentially be narrators, spectators in the fight. This way that Kenshin and Cho don't have to narrate their own fight, have to explain their feelings while fighting. It's kind of like an anime trope that I think is kind of best handled when the characters aren't talking to themselves like that, and there are spectators to, you know, comment on it, you know. That's the first reason. And then the second reason is to kind of get all the chess pieces together for the next part of the story, which is what's so much more exciting than this chapter. This chapter was essentially just kind of a setup to the fight, you know, like the first portion of it, showing us that Kenshin is stronger than Cho, but that Cho has, you know, secrets to reveal, that there's another layer to him, a second form, if you will. But that is what's going to be so much more interesting, and that's something that we're going to have to get into next chapter. So how's that for a cliffhanger, y'all? And that has been Act 78 of Rurouni Kenshin. If you like this video and you want to see more, then consider subscribing to the channel. Leave a thumbs up and comment down below something that you enjoyed about this chapter. I just like Kenshin just being in control and telling Cho that you gotta bring something better than Saito's Gatotsu if you're gonna, you know, take me on. Alright, I'll see you all in the comment section down below. Bye, cha. Welcome back, everybody, to the Wandering Samurai Study, in which we review and analyze every single act told in Rurouni Kenshin. Oh no.